trillions of dollars, the hundreds and thousands of billions, just what UN is investing $2.5 trillion every year into the SDGs. We have not achieved much when you look at reality. And then you start to realize at the end, it all comes down to education.
Welcome back to another edition From Crisis to Creation here on Mentory TV. I'm Patricia Falco Beccalli, your host. And before getting into our subject of today, let me say thank you. Thank you so much for all your proactivity, your comments, your suggestions about guests I should get onto the show. I take them to heart, and I hopefully will be able to turn it around and bring you what you co-create with me here on Mentory TV. And thank you also for all your subscribers. You did also hit the bell button, so thank you for that. And of course, for potentially liking and sharing this video as well. Okay, let's get to today's subject. And there I would like to look at development money. I mean, there is about $158 billion spent in 2019 in official development money across the globe. That means governments spending money in order to change the destitute out of some of these countries, get people out of poverty, and really make aid something of the past. But if you ask me, that's been going on for years, if not decades, and certainly for far too long. So where's the money going? And this is why I invited Hannes Schmid to the show. He is a star photographer, an artist, and also the founder of Smiling Gecko, an NGO that particularly looks at Cambodia, trying to change the lives of many people down there. Hannes, so good to have you here on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hannes, you know what? Before getting into our conversation, I think I would like to launch our session today with a screen share. Let me just fish out what I have prepared for our viewers. And that is on your website, the very first video that I will actually like to share with the people to lay the land what really is the basic of what you called your life mission.
Cambodia is one of the poorest countries in the world today. 4.6 million people live under the poverty level of $1 a day. They do not receive any support from the government and live in the slums or at rubbish landfills of the city, as well as in the city outskirts, in extreme poverty. For a few cents per hour, they have to work in factories under inhumane conditions without social or health insurance. Tens of thousands of people live in slums and feed themselves with unclean food which they find at the rubbish dumps. They have no access to education, medical care, and clean drinking water. Corruption and arranged marriages of women and children are not uncommon. Thousands of children are in child prostitution. They have to serve their clients for very little money. Due to their circumstance of extreme poverty, women are being trafficked into prostitution.
Right. I think this video very nicely set the scene. Hannes, tell us a little bit about what really pulled you into looking after these people, these kind of circumstances a little bit deeper, and then take the next step and say, I need to do something about it.
Well, my journey started in 2012. I was in an art project in Thailand, and it's about the Taoistic ritual opera, Chinese opera. And well, on the evening, I crossed the bridge, and there was a girl begging. She was covered with a piece of fabric, and I dropped some money into her rusty kind of box, and then the fabric went away, and I was deeply shocked because I never expected to see a completely burned face, and I realized the whole body is burned. And while I started to talk to her, and I start to learn that she is actually Cambodian, not Thai, that her father, when she was 3 years old, was in deep financial trouble, couldn't get the money, couldn't pay back, and the only solution for him was to sell his daughters, but nobody wanted them. So he took a blowtorch, burned her face, her body, and was able to sell her into a begging syndication. And for me, you know, you hear all this, you know, Slumdog Millionaires and everything, but when you stand in front of a girl. For me, she was very small, very petite. I've realized after she's 13, and what it happened was when she was 3. And you said, this cannot happen. So actually, I don't know, my reaction was I bought her from the syndication. I paid money, put her in a car, covered her with a piece of blanket and drove across the border, smuggled her back into Cambodia and put her in an orphanage. And there I learned that every year there's about 250, 300 children being splashed in acids. And that brought me then finally actually to the dump site and the slums.
Yeah, and it's an amazing story because and we're going to talk more about you as a personality and your own story many years ago before you started founding Smiling Gecko, that there are these kind of realities which seem in our world so unreal that you have to sell your children in order to either live or pay your debts back, and you will be able to do it. And then they end up, what is the syndicate? What do they do with these children that are disfigured on purpose? What do they do with them in Thailand?
Well, the problem is that in the Buddhistic countries, when you look like this, people give money. And these children, they beg, and then the money gets taken away by the syndication. But the reason why I tell always this beginning of my story was, well, you get this urge to help. You want to help, right? And through this girl, I was ending up at the dump site and the slums because that I've been told where I find these people. I actually was told that I find much worse. And then I started to help. I'm buying rice. I'm buying milk powder because the women, they have no milk. They're undernourished. Everybody is sick, right? And I buy mineral water. And then after nearly 1 year, I start to realize I haven't really moved anything. They still live in this horrible environment. Children still can't go to school. They're all sick, there is child prostitution. And then you start to think, what have I done wrong or what I can really do? And what is really close when you live there, it's these children, these big brown eyes. And, they look like happy. They run through the rubbish. They're dirty. They never wash. They cough. They're sick. But it's this kind of controversial kind of thing. Sometimes I had the feeling they were much more happy than our children here in Switzerland.
Well, it's a good point, and it's macabre to say, because of course these children don't know any different. They don't know what could be on the other side. They're not linked in. They don't have, they don't have the media out there. But the fact stands that these kind of circumstances where children are being born and grow up basically with rubbish, that's the reality. And I think the most important point you just made is I gave, I bought this for them, I provided that for them, but nothing in their underlying reality changed, because there's a difference between donating and then there's helping for self-help creation.
That's correct. But then the problem was I realized, well, what do you do if you have no education? I mean, we worry in Switzerland when our kids 1 week out of school, there's a disaster. The Bundesrat makes a decision, right? And I'm wondering here that we not close all our school holidays because, oh my God, kids go not for 5 weeks, they cannot go to school. So I supported the children. I brought them to school, right? But the teacher wouldn't take them because we were stinking like rubbish bags. So I had to build a laundry, buy 2 pairs of school uniform. One I was washed, one they were wearing. And then I had to pay for the children. After 7 months, I sit down and said, Hannes, this is even more stupid to support like these children because I'm close to 70 years old. How long can I support them? Mm-hmm. And the teachers hardly speak their own language correctly and can read and write. So I said, this is all waste. What do I do? And I started to realize that I have to find an economical way. So I started to ask the family, where are you from? They said, oh, we came from the north, Battambang, and he is 60, 70, 80 kilometers away. I said, do you still have land? They said, no, has been taken away, land grabbing, or we lost it because we couldn't pay our debts. And then I said, but is somebody there? Yeah, we have an uncle and an auntie. So I was renting trucks. I uploaded 10, 15 families, 80, 90 people on the truck. We drove up there and I started to build fish farms, chicken farms, vegetable, and I thought, wow, Hannes, you are a genius. Now you really find the egg of the Columbus, because now they can make money, right? And then with the money, they can support their children, they can buy medication, right? And maybe also buy a motorbike or something like this. That was my idea.
That was your idea, and it's a fantastic idea. I just wonder, how did these families just hop onto the lorry and trust you that you would look after them?
Well, by then I was over a year a part of their community. I helped. They saw that I helped. But the problem, I failed. Nothing worked. You know, after 1.5 months, my fish were swimming upside down. They were dying. They had these white spots, right? The pigs couldn't walk anymore. They were 45, 50 kilos, right? And we had to slaughter them because something was wrong. I didn't know what was wrong, right? The chicken wouldn't lay eggs. And when I started to put my wonderful seeds, bio-organic seeds from Switzerland for carrots, celery, leeks, nothing would grow. It was devastating. It was a total failure. And I lost a big part of our family asset because it didn't work.
Yeah. The interesting point was that you actually bought land. You said, okay, I want to help, but I want to basically create a life for these families. I think it's about 12 families. You bought a huge plot of land and then you subdivided it into little mini farms, building a house and providing, I think, a chicken and a pig. And as you were just saying, and from that, everything started growing because these people could start growing their own vegetables, potentially not only eat them, but also sell them. So there, a little bit of an economic independence started feeding into the picture, which then would eventually allow the parents to pay for the schooling for the children and then change the generation after. And that is really very interesting in your story, where you had these fantastic intentions, you privately paid all of this, and nothing worked. So what was the next step when you said, okay, nothing is growing on this land, the fish is dying, and the people are starting to lose faith in me as well because they trusted me. So where did you turn? Who helped you?
Well, okay, the beginning is, you know, that's what happened when I went to that land. And when I see I failed with everything, right? I had a friend down there who supported me. Also, when I was sending money to the Canadian bank, 15,000 Swiss francs, I only get 8, 9, 10. And I could show my waiver from SWIFT transform. Well, they said, oh, sorry, but we only have 8. Do you want the 8? You know, we're living in the most corrupt country in the world. So when all the stupid guys like me who's sending privately money, you're not getting this money, right? And then my friend told me that I have to start an NGO. A local NGO. So I found a young lawyer, and in 3 months we had Smiling Gecko Cambodia. It was in 2014. And then I said, let's make the same mistake again. Then I was buying my land. Then I was doing these little farms, you know, 12 farms each on 4,000 square meter. And well, it worked very well at the beginning till again the fish start to die, the chicken wouldn't lay eggs again, the pig start to die, and nothing would grow, right? Yeah. And I was so devastated because by then I was really deeply in there with my finances, right? And I was looking for money. Nobody gave me money. They said, you know what, if you can prove that it works, we give you money. I said, well, if I can prove it works, I don't need your money anymore.
Exactly,
I need
exactly.
the money now. I mean, crazy. Well, then I made a phone call to the agriculture departments in Switzerland, and one guy called me back, and he looked into, and he was just shaking his head. He said, Mr. Schmid, I have checked you out on the internet. You're a fantastic artist, but I think it's not enough to be an agriculture engineer. You would need to have another kind of background in the study. I said, okay, so what will we do? Can you help? He said, no, not much. But he was sending 2 of the agriculture engineers. One was to do for animals, chicken, pigs, and the other one for vegetable. So they came. And when they came, their hair were standing straight up. They said, Hannes, you need 4 to 7 years till you can plant something. There is no nutrition. There's no nitrogen. There's no nitrogen in your soil. This is just sand and red soil, right? And then your pigs probably have a very heavy genetic defect. You know, they will never actually reach 100 kilo because their liver will fail. They can't walk anymore. And then your chicken, I said, is the meat tender? I said, no, it's tough like hell, this chicken. Right? But, you know, the Cambodians, they like it. No, they like it because they use it for the soup. So you can cook it for 6 hours and the meat is still on the bone. But they wouldn't lay eggs. So I said, so what do we do? So we started with fertilizing, composting. We found new kind of symbols. I started flying with genetic material, with the sperms of the pigs. Yeah. You know, we have always 6 spores where we milked in the morning, right? And then I flew with them to Cambodia. We inserted into the mother's house. And that's how we developed a healthy pig with a very good meat. The same, the genetics with the chicken. You know, I had 10 chicken and 1 rooster, as 10 female and a rooster, right? And that's how we then changed a lot roosters. We changed the females, and like this we make actually a normally genetic natural change. So suddenly we had enough eggs, fertility rate went up to 90%, right? And that's how we developed all this kind of thing. But it was a long way of really trials and miss and trial again and again and again, till actually about 2018, where we started to have our learnings together, start to understand much more what this is all about and what it actually is needed.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one. So how many years was it trial and error? Like 4?
Well, it started actually in 2012. Right?
Unbelievable. Okay. And you didn't give up. I mean, your personality, I've known you now a little bit, is definitely dynamite.
No, I'm an artist. You see, I'm not a financial guy. I'm also not a philanthropic guy. I'm a simple artist. And well, maybe that's why it was possible. We think different. I'm not afraid to fail. I'm not afraid to make mistakes, right? But what you need is enormous energy and enthusiasm and curiosity. And yeah, you're tapping in different fields. I had a school in the village with 780 children and 5 teachers. I mean, I knew that these teachers, they are not up speed. The kids wouldn't learn it. They learn by heart, but they can hardly count, right? I said, I need a school. So I read an article here in Switzerland about a professor at the ETH and about alternative construction materials. So this is bamboo and this is a mushroom kind of composite who is exchanging concrete. So I wrote him a mail. And then, well, again, it's my trick. You know, I asked him for a coffee. So I went there and he was excited about my project. And I said, you know, I have 34 students. They need to do their architecture diploma. They can look into your school. So they all came down there, right? They study Angkor Wat and radiation, where the sun goes up and the sun goes down and everything. They came up with 18 finished projects where we selected one. It was one of 5 young Swiss women architects, and they got a studio 6 months and they blamed my school, right?
Amazing.
But I did the same mistake, like probably a lot of people. We always give money to build a house. I don't need a house. I can have 4 trees, a piece of plastic, and benches. I need teachers.
You need
the best
future.
House is worthless.
You need future.
I need teachers. You see, so I made the same mistake. I had a wonderful school, but I had no teacher. I was working with the PH Pedagogic Institute here in Zurich, and they were supposed to help me. Then I realized they have no understanding at all what is going on down there. Yeah, now I wanted to do Khmer, but I also wanted to do bilingual. But well, I couldn't do bilingual because my teachers didn't speak English, you know. And Khmer, I couldn't do really Khmer because the teacher were neither able to really introduce Khmer in a proper way. So then I found a Swiss woman. She's Barbara, amazing. She did over in 40 countries. She built schools. She was actually never in Switzerland, and she came and she helped me to build up. Today we run one of the best school system. Even it goes further. Even Singapore education ministry comes to us and say, "Wow, can we copy a part of your school?"
Really? Now that is interesting. That is interesting.
Yeah,
and let me just interject there, because one thing is to have an idea. The other one is to get other people behind your idea and infuse and really help you proactively. But then establish something that other countries potentially look at and say, this is interesting. And just, Hannes, allow me to share another video that is on your website, Smiling Gecko, which puts our audience into what then started working, because you said, okay, everything went wrong, but then all of a sudden, 2018, it seems things were falling into place. We learned our lesson. We grew our chickens and everything, and it's working. So that's the video we saw before. Let me just scroll down. And this is the video. It's called Who We Are.
To break the vicious cycle, Smiling Gecko, with direct help and support from other NGOs, engages itself towards a sustainable fight against the causes of poverty. 60 kilometers away from Phnom Penh, Hannes Schmid manages 120 hectares of land with economical, ecological and sustainable agricultural, tourism and skilled work projects, with work and training opportunities for the people living in poverty. Today, hundreds of Cambodians have found work and regular income with and at Smiling Gecko. Many other extensive projects will follow. All of Smiling Gecko projects have the same goal, which is to provide young Cambodians with qualified training so that they become capable to earn a living and support themselves and their families. Education plays a crucial role in the development or progress of a society. Therefore, the opening of Smiling Gecko School, which enrolled more than 1,000 pupils in 2017, takes on a central role. With the holistic approach of Smiling Gecko, Hannes Schmid helps to shape and build a sustainable future for the people in poverty.
Well, Hannes, you know, when I looked at that project and what you pulled out of the hat, even though it was a long pull, but this is a pull that was definitely worth the bunny coming out. It is amazing that all of this started with one serendipity, you being in Thailand for a total different assignment as a star photographer and ending up to really create something that is not only helping, but potentially can be a model to be scaled not only across Cambodia, but many of these underdeveloped parts of this world. Tell us a little bit about, once you hit this kind of success, and this was all private, these are private donations, these are people from institutions also helping you, but it was nothing really governmental, especially not the Cambodian government, as far as I understand. Tell us, what was really what is your relationship with the local government, and to what extent would it have been really helpful to make your dream, your mission, and the dream of these people, the realities, come true faster?
Well, you start to realize when you are start a project like this, you are a foreigner and you're a guest in a country, right? And well, I don't agree with the politics. I don't agree with the system, about the corruption, about selling children off, prostitution, slavery. I mean, if you look really into it, your hairs are starting to really standing straight up. And but you have to accept that you need to find a dialogue. It doesn't mean that I cannot go against them, because otherwise I'm being kicked out. So I have to try to find a dialogue, make connection. I make connection to Hun Sen. I was in the part of the team who brought him to Davos 3 years ago, to the economy forum. And then the first time you start to talk, I start to economy minister, to education ministers, right? But then you can understand that you don't get help from them. What you have to find is that they don't pull some hindrances in your way, so
yes,
they let you
some
do.
challenges, making it even harder for you.
Yeah. That's why I'm a local NGO. That means I have tax exemption, VAT exemption, I have import releases. They don't actually care what we do. So don't go and ask for money, because when you start to ask for money, it becomes a different game, right? But the same is with the foreign institution like DEZA or the Bundesamt für Entwicklung. They don't finance small NGOs. They have 4 year systems, right? And then once they do vocational training, and then they do a little bit agriculture and do this, but they always involve the local government. And that's where also then the problem comes. Actually, what you mentioned at the beginning, the billions of dollars, the hundreds and thousands of billions, just what UN is investing $2.5 trillion every year into the SDGs. We have not achieved much when you look at reality. And then you start to realize at the end, it all comes down to education. If you have children who cannot go to school, who cannot read and write, who don't have an understanding, how would they be ever able to become an entrepreneur, to start a real company, not selling on the market some glass noodles or some whatever, fish or vegetable? That doesn't help economically a country. And this is one of the biggest mistakes. Also, still today, governments, they support vocational training, but this is like putting the horse up on the
exactly.
tail.
Exactly. You have to start before that. You have to start
before that. That means at the same time, but you have to realize, I realized very quickly, if I take a 3-year-old child, it takes 20 years till it's ready. It's not even ready after 20 years. My son is 18 now. He does an apprenticeship as a IT developer, right, at Swisscom. But he is not ready. I need to finance another 5 years. Now we're coming from the outside and say, oh yeah, we give them a little bit of school, a little bit of reading and writing, or maybe a meal a day. This is not enough as well. You have to start to think holistically. I copied Switzerland, the system of Switzerland. Why is Switzerland working? Because our small and medium cooperation about the education system, the social system, the health systems we have. 70% of all the Swiss, they don't work at the bank or at the pharma. There are small corporations in every village, in every little town. There is innovation. They're holding everything together. And it's very funny, all the people study at the Harskissenkallen or the university, right? We don't have to, well, of course we have to study, but you just have to look into your own house and see how is our house organized. And then when you copy these elements, you're on the perfect way. There's no better system than the Swiss system. I'm not talking about politically, it's very slow, but from our general system, where we came from, we went through the same thing that Cambodia is going through. And I don't understand why people don't see that. And now we can prove with what we did. 2020 was a hard year for us with the COVID.
We talk about the corona.
We were worried about it. But even then, with all this, we just did our new business plans, our old things, what we do. We still were successful. And our entities where we run, they all break even. Yes. I mean, in this very short time.
Yes, we'll get to that. But let me just roll back for one moment. And I know, Hannes, you're an artist. You are not too much into finance. But at the end of the day, finance, money makes the world go round. And unless it's allocated in a, sensical way, as you were just saying, for example, in the school system, just the infrastructure, nothing is going to move in the long term, because education, opens the horizon, but also gives you credibility that you can become an entrepreneur, for example, and people believe in you. And so you attract finance as well. So we were talking about this development assistance committee members. That's the OECD numbers. The budget, a yearly budget in 2019, $152.8 billion US. Now, that is a lot of money. Of course it is. I mean, it's more than $150 billion. But the global economy is worth close to 100 trillion US dollars. So that sounds to me like, billions to trillions thing. The rich countries, if you look how much they give now, not private donors, but really countries, the official money. The worst one, okay, let's not talk about Slovakia, but amongst the worst one is America. If you look at the gross national income to their contributions, I mean, it's several billions they give, fair enough. But compared to the GDP, they're amongst, the lower third of donors. The higher, of course, the smaller the country, the higher the donation. And that is Luxembourg, number one, Norway and Sweden, giving close enough to about 1% of the overall contribution. And you were mentioning the UN, the Sustainable Development Goals. And there they said you should give at least 0.7% of your national GDP to these countries, compared to the gross national income. The reason why I pull all this data out is because, exactly as you said, I was giving privately, but people said, are you stupid? You cannot do it. You never know where your money goes, because corruption is around the corner, especially when people are suffering, especially if there is a system that allows it. And this is exactly the Sumpf, the morass where the money is going. So tell me, where does this money end up? You say on a local government level, but it never filters through to an NGO, a specific NGO like Smiling Gecko, for example.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned there is a huge amount of money out there. But we're giving since 20 years. This huge amount of money.
I mean, I remember in the 70s when I was little, I was looking at the African babies with these big bellies, hungerödem, okay? And I'm still looking at them, I'm over 50. So I think
the problem is even like Cambodia gets from the UN 500 million, $500 million every year, just giving. We just give it to them. We don't even know what they do. Then the other thing is a lot of this money is government, is tax money or is tax deducted money. So when it is gone, nobody cares. And they have to spend it, because if they don't spend that amount, they have less next year. And there is nobody who has really a responsibility in details of this money. I even question, there is so much money and you don't need so much money. First, what you have to understand, you have to invest in human capital. Without human capital, and that's nobody did. Well, we think that $250, $300 a year is enough for a child to go in an education. In Zurich, in Switzerland, we spend $30,000 on a first and then a second grader a year without uniform, without medical trade, without food, without nothing. I'm spending $4,250 per year for a child. And I've been blamed by UBS Optimus, by the government. They say, are you crazy?
And that wraps up the first part of my conversation with Hannes Schmid about the Smiling Gecko, the NGO that particularly looks at Cambodia. And if you do like our conversations here on Mentory TV, why don't you become a member by joining for free, subscribing, hitting the bell button so I can always keep you informed. And yes, thank you so much for your comments, your key takeaways, and potentially also for liking and sharing. See you soon.